Where's all the yours or his in here? Yeah, somewhere.
Well, I switched out of the 8 o'clock to 9:45.
I didn't see it open.
I filled out the closed petition form like immediately after. I saw that the 9:45 one got closed, and I was like, I was gonna fill this out immediately, so I'm the first one.
Okay. So I got an hour more from the city.
Okay, great. There it is.
Yo. Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Sorry I came a little late. It's just busy with this stupid thing.
Hello, college Republicans. How are you doing?
Good.
Woo! One more time. College Republicans, how are you doing? Woo! Right, we got those guys for you tonight. We got. He has a Bachelor of Arts from Columbia Creative Writing, and just this month released his memoir, Cis White Gay, Making a Gender Haircut. He's in a critical space, and the talk tonight is the queer call. I'm going to let Ben introduce himself, and let him take it away.
Thanks. My name's Ben. It's good to be here. I did my murder grade. I did just come out with a book just like a week and a half ago. Cis White Gay, Making me a Gender Heretic. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, George, for asking me. Shane, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to come up here. One of my best friends actually lives right down the street, and she got her PhD here, and her husband is a professor, actually, in the graduate program. And they just left her out of town today, so I'm staying at their place, but like we were shift passing, so unfortunately I didn't see them. But anyway, it worked out really well, and so I'm glad to see this town. I've never been here. And it's strange to be back. I graduated from Columbia in 2020, May 2020, and my route to academia and to Columbia was very twisty and weird. And my book is a memoir, essentially. So while it has a lot of cultural commentary and a lot of political commentary, George read it. Thanks for reading it, George, and he seemed to like it, I think. And while it has a lot of that in it, it is at its foundation a memoir. And what I kind of wanted to do is because I had, had a change of mind and a change of heart, I suppose, over time, especially after my experience working in LGBT activism, going to Columbia, working for GLAAD, and doing these things. And I wanted to kind of document how I got from one place intellectually to another. And so while I deal with controversial topics, heated things, have opinions that a lot of people will appreciate hearing and have appreciated hearing because they feel like, oh, that's kind of what I've been thinking. And there will be a lot of people, and are a lot of people that don't like the things that I have to say or the way that, the opinions that I have, which is totally fine. I don't necessarily want to really try to convince anybody to think exactly like me. What I wanted it to be was a book where I was just telling what it is. Okay, so who knows if Amy couldn't hear this? Okay, so, and a lot of folks who were Catholic, who had kind of felt a little bit detached and separated from the church and kind of lost spiritually and wanting to, reconnect with like the foundation of Christianity and just get, reconnected with their faith, kind of started, especially young people on college campuses especially in Ann Arbor, Michigan and so on, started to kind of come together to pray and to have Bible studies. And they started to experience what they call like charisms, or these kind of the ability to speak in tongues, glossolalia, or prophecy. God speaking directly to them, or eventually like kind of laying hands on in prayer and kind of feeling like that can heal or prompt healing, that kind of thing. And it also was a lot of folks that were like kind of reformed hippies, like coming out of the drug haze of the 60s. There were a lot of people that were like high on LSD, and then they were like super high on Jesus. So they were like, okay, it's all about love, it's about grace, it's about mercy, like praise the Lord. We're gonna, we all play the guitar and the tambourine, so we'll play the guitar and the tambourine, prayer meetings and worship and everything, and that'll be how it is. My parents found a community in 1976. They were engaged to be married. I was born in '83. They were engaged to be married. And my mom was raised in a very strict, not very strict religious household, but she, attended Catholic school, and she grew up with a lot of religious guilt. Like she, wanted faith, she believed, but she didn't like all the strict rules and regulations of the church and how kind of rigid and dogmatic it was. But she did want, a faith. She was Catholic. My father was, I think, Lutheran at the time. He ended up converting. My mother's father was Jewish, and her mother was Catholic, and she was raised Catholic, while her brothers were raised Jewish, which is very weird. But anyway, so they go to this prayer meeting, and there's like people, on the floor, and speaking in tongues and jumping around and giving and like all this crazy stuff. My mom was very into it. She was like, they were all super welcoming and super kind and loving, and like Jesus was about love and grace and mercy, and like praise the Lord, welcome, love you. And my father was like, this is weird, like this is crazy, but she was like, I want to go, and he said, okay, let's do this, we'll along. So they got married, and that what began as a smaller community grew as covenant communities were really starting to explode, like in different areas. There was like Word of God, Lamb of God, and just different things, and they kind of went under this umbrella called Sword of the Spirit, which started like out of Ann Arbor. Anyway, it was like this overarching kind of umbrella organization. And covenant communities are really worldwide now. And so it became what started as this small community, started attracting more members. And as the leader, his name was David, linked up with these folks, part of Sword of the Spirit, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and kind of started learning more about how to form a covenant community and what that meant. It started becoming more dogmatic and just a little bit more authoritarian, a little more antiquated. And what I mean by that is, there was this idea where they thought we're all going to live in the same area. Now, there were a lot of young people, like 20-somethings, college folks, but then a little bit older too. But they all lived like in the same houses, in the same apartment developments, and all that kind of thing. Even like on a property, like on a farm. It wasn't a commune, but it was just in the same general area. And then as they started growing, they kind of hooked up with other people in the program and got married very young. And they started having kids. And they're like, we want to have a kind of like bulwark. We want to form a bulwark, like a covenant community against what they saw was like the degradation of the church by modern forces of, humanism and feminism and all of these kind of things. They were thinking that even the church itself is liberalizing, and we feel that we need to just kind of form this bulwark against like what they thought they saw coming, and how they saw things were changing. So they were like, let's all live in the same area, we'll settle in the same area, and we're kind of just completely involved in each other's lives. Like we'll have a small school where all our kids will go to, we'll teach the kids, we'll have prayer meetings every week, we'll have prayer meetings throughout the week. We'll have individual men's meetings, individual women's meetings, and there will be just the leadership. So there will be just Dave at the top, and then there will be a couple other male leaders called coordinators. And then there will be a few female leaders called handmaids, and literally handmaids. So they were the female leaders were called handmaids. And so that's how that started. Now, so all the families settled in what was called Kingsville, like just outside of Baltimore. Within like however many square mile radius. So it was almost like every second or third house was like a community member. So people would kind of move into the area and suddenly realize that they were living like amidst like kind of fundamentalist, like religious community and not really know if they didn't really know about the land of God before going in there. So anyway, my father started, like rose up in the community and he became a coordinator because he had good business acumen, he had an MBA, law degree, et cetera. So they were like, oh, this guy can really help us and grow the community and organize it and attract members, et cetera. My mom was very into like the spiritual aspect of it. And so she was really drawn into that. But it became very, again, just very male-driven and dogmatic in the sense that like women were, like husbands were essentially called husband masters. Women were supposed to be super submissive to their husbands in all manners and in all forms. Not only that, but it became very cult-like. And essentially it did become a cult. And how that worked was the folks at the top kind of required, there was a hierarchy of leadership, but they kind of required everybody in the community to kind of confess their wrongdoings and their kind of sins and the impurities of their heart and their mind to their head, their leader, and then the leader would take it to the coordinator. So it was like all of these secrets and personal kind of vulnerabilities and fears and whatever would go to the leaders, and so the leaders kind of had this overarching idea of like what was going on in the hearts and the minds of every individual in the community, and they would kind of pass down their dictates. And it was a purity policing atmosphere. So what I mean by that is like everybody was in competition to be more moral and better than the next person. So if like a handmaid would say, oh, I look at this nice dress, like I got it for $2 at Ambest, which was like a local, vintage store in a thrift store. And then someone would say like, oh, well, I got mine for $1. And then someone would be like, well, I actually made mine, and I made my whole family sell. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like this, who can be more meek, who can be more generous, who can be more giving, who can be more self-forgetting, selfless, just more moral. And it was really difficult for a lot of people because it's impossible to keep up with that. You can't, nobody's perfect. And to be constantly in competition or feeling like you are being judged morally by the folks around you who you really do love and who you care about and want community with and respect, it can be really detrimental to people's mental health. A lot of people ended up leaving. And there was money involved, of course, too, as there always is. Tithes were collected every month, really, from like 10%, I think, of people's income was to the leadership. So, but a lot of people had questions about that and were frustrated. And eventually, the Catholic Archdiocese got involved and did like an investigation because people reported and contacted the cardinal saying, like, these people are kind of claiming legitimacy by the Catholic Church, but they're really drawing people away from that kind of, having people live and abide by them and kind of treat them like God, like Pope even. And that's not what we thought the Catholic Church was about. And so it ended up separating officially from the Catholic Church, but continued on, and it did end up falling apart. As more people left, the school is still there, and the school actually ended up growing. So I'm going to speed up here, but I just wanted to paint a picture of where I came from. That was the first 12 years of my life. And it was an idyllic childhood, to be honest. I didn't know anything else. I had 3 siblings, and so growing up in the same area as all these kids, we all lived in the same area, and it's like it's very tight knit. There were 4 kids in my grade, including me. And from kindergarten to 8th grade, there were 100 kids in the school. It was just a very tight knit community, and it was wonderful. And what I didn't know at the time was that I was very, very different in a way that would be kind of unacceptable to the people that I was involved in community with, and then also people in the outside world that I would eventually meet. I was super, super gender, like super early kid, like really gender nonconforming. Like all of my interests were generally typical of a girl. Like I was more interested in like what my older sisters were doing. Watching soap operas with them and listening to music and dancing and choreography and fashion and all of these things. And I also was just very effeminate, as behaviorally. But because there wasn't, like an in crowd, like where there weren't the jocks and the geeks, because it was just this tight knit community. It was too small. There wasn't like an in clique. I didn't really know or realize how different I was. Now the adults did, and so they kind of drilled it into my head from a very early age, like, oh God, this kid's probably going to be one of them. So we got to make sure that he knows from an early age, like just how bad that is. So it was very much instilled for me from the beginning, like gay is very bad, gay is evil, gay is dangerous, gay is da 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 da. And I just absorbed all of it because I didn't really think it had anything to do with me. I was like, okay, I just kind of saw everybody else kind of gathering these lessons. And I was just a believer, and I was like, yes, I'm going to be a good little Christian boy, and I had that in me to be like just a really, really good kid. So my mom decided to leave the community. She was like, this isn't what the community that I signed up for. Now, we had no say in it, but we also weren't going to argue. I'm 12 years old. My sisters had graduated from God, they had gone through kindergarten to 8th grade. Now they're in Catholic school. My brother's 9. He's, and then I'm about to go into 7th grade. So I finished 6th grade at the school, and then suddenly we're just ripped out of the school. We're just ripped out of the community, and we moved to a new area. Okay. So, and we're totally kind of shunned essentially from the community, because what the community would do is leaders, when they would kind of start learning that people started doubting, when there were people starting to question the leadership and question how things were functioning in the dogma, and kind of just thinking like, I don't know if I agree with this. They started kind of doing things to just slowly push them out. So it's like suddenly they knew my mom was becoming a little bit of a doubter. Like, I don't necessarily like that, my husband is super cold to me, but he pretends that we're this perfect couple and gives seminars on like how to be a perfect husband. And then, belittles me and berates me and doesn't talk to me or anything. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I mean, he wasn't horrible and he wasn't abusive, but there was just a huge disconnect with them, and there were a lot of issues in their marriage. And so there was just a lot of things going on where it was like an image on the outside, and then things were not good between them in the home. So, she was like, we should get therapy. They're like, you can't go to therapist because who knows what kind of, new agey, crazy, wicked bullshit they'll tell you. And so, you just need to get right with the Lord. Like, if you have a problem, and clearly you are the problem, because your husband's fine. He's not upset. You're upset. So you just need to get right with the Lord. And you need to pray, and you need to get better, and you need to just like whatever, just get over it. And that was it. And so she was like, all right, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. So we left. And so, we didn't argue, because we were just like, okay, this is how we do it. But here I am, 12 years old, somewhere after 6th grade. Again, 4 kids in my grade, spending all day in prayer and worship, like very tight-knit school, small school, small community, small world. And then we moved to a different county, and ties are cut from all the best friends that I knew since I was an infant, like where we're crawling in blankets together, baptized on the same day, that kind of thing. All my teachers, the leaders who would pray over me, no more. And then my parents split up that same year, and I started going to public school. So in public school, there's like 200 kids in the grade, and there's no prayer, and it's a completely and utterly different world. And what you can imagine is, well, because like I said earlier, I was a super girly kid. Well, in the public school, they really took notice. There was not any kind of like inner, everybody's just on the same team. There were cliques. There were popular kids, there were jocks, there was a whole different world to navigate. And so from the very beginning, I was just tortured. Are you a boy or a girl? You're a fag. I mean, I would open a library book and it would be like, Ben is a fag, written in the library book in the media center, that kind of thing. Well, coming from this place where I had just learned how evil and horrible homosexuality was, and being a true believer, and then being ripped out of that, losing all of my community and all of my friends, and then being told by this new community that I'm trying to group with, like, you are that thing, that evil thing. Because I didn't really know yet. I was just kind of going through puberty. I really didn't know. I just was really different and really gender nonconforming, just a really girly kid. And it was terrifying. Terrifying. And so, from the age of 12, I started really kind of dissociating, because I didn't know how to deal with that kind of level of anxiety and depression and that fear, that constant fear. And so what I did was to deal with it was I defeminized. I made it a full-time job to defeminize myself. So like I was constantly self-scanning for like signs. So I would just I became a chameleon. When people are so clipped into and geared into your behaviors and how you are, you start to adapt. If it's like a kind of survival technique. It was just a survival, just a coping mechanism. So I started learning. And I started seeing that, oh, when I say words with S's in them, people have things to say. When I put my hand on my hip, when I brush my hair behind my ear, people have things to say about that. And yeah, I can see what they're saying, like that is more girly, and kind of being able to be constantly aware of what my mannerisms were. I was constantly just kind of self-scanning. So I walked differently. I wore different clothes. I cut my hair. I deepened my voice purposefully. I stopped talking so much. There was just a lot of things that I did to make myself acceptable to other people. And of course, as you can imagine, then I turned 12, 13, 14, I'm getting a little bit older, and I'm like, oh, I am that thing that they said I was. Like, they were right. How did they know I am that thing? And it just got worse and worse from there. So I started drinking. I mean, from 12, 13, 14, I was getting wasted. And so like drinking by myself, like drinking in my bedroom, like just trying to dissociate, because what happened was inside that anxiety and that depression, and I read a lot about this in the book, is I developed a form of OCD called scrupulosity. And scrupulosity is, you guys are probably familiar with OCD, where like someone with serious, we kind of throw around the word OCD, like, oh, I'm so OCD, but you're just maybe a little bit anal or whatever. But like there's actually a serious disorder where people have anxiety and they'll like wash their hands everybody does like washing their hands, or like turning off like. And it's kind of this way to try to gain some kind of control over things that they felt like they didn't have any control over. So when you feel like things are out of control and you're super, super anxious, and a lot of things are happening and you're kind of experiencing, trauma and all these things, and you're constantly afraid, you're like, okay, this is how I'll exhibit control. But if I wash my hands 5 times, then nothing bad's gonna happen. If I wash my hands 5 times, then that kid's not gonna call me back. Or if I do it 20 times, then da-da-da-da. Well, with scrupulosity, it's about prayer and ritual stuff. So it's like the sign of the cross. It's praying. So it's saying like, God forgive me, 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 over and over and over again. It's kneeling. It's doing the sign of the cross. It's saying amen, amen out loud, and then saying it again and again and again and again. And really it's about repenting, because it's like there's this kind of connection, like, God is obviously in control of all this. And so if I can only get right with who's clearly super, super pissed at me, like super angry with me, super just disdainful and disgusted with me, clearly. And so with all these horrible things that are going on, if I can just repent enough, maybe he'll spare me. Like maybe he'll just be like, all right, I'm gonna let you off today. Maybe we'll revisit this tomorrow. But right now, all right, I'm not gonna kill your mom or whatever. Because I thought the worst thing that could happen was like my mom could be here. I was very much like, oh, if I don't do this, or every time I sinned, if I thought a negative thought about somebody, or if I can curse, but if I did happen to say like something adjacent to a curse word, I would be like, oh my God, my mom's gonna die in a car wreck, that kind of thing. And it got worse and worse, and so the alcohol kind of was the one thing that kind of helped that, but it just inebriated me, and I didn't really have to do it. It was kind of pain and the anxiety that came along with that. When I was in high school, this OCD consistently got worse, and I'm playing like a double life. Like I'm wearing all these different. First of all, I'm very intent on excelling. Like, wanted to do well in school. I was an athlete as well. I was, all these things, and so like I'm very intent on just being perfect and excelling. And then meanwhile, like I'm trying to juggle all of this mental stuff going on in my head. And then I started working at a restaurant when I was about 16, and I started smoking pot with the other kids there. And pot like became the solution to the answer. I was like, because it didn't inebriate, like I could still do my homework. I could still like go to work, and I was buzzing with it's seafood restaurant, But like, and so I could still function, but it just calmed the thought. It helped me sleep. It was just a lot better. So it kind of became an everyday habit. Well, a year later, then I started doing it, and I started doing So I graduated from high school. I graduated from high school in 2001. Guys. So I graduated from, when were you guys born, by the way? Who's freshman, like first year, second year, third? Who's first year? Okay, second year? Third year? Fourth? Graduate students, I think? Got it, okay. So, yeah, 2001, so what year was that? That was like, you were like 23, 24. So you were like born around 2002, 2003, I think, or 2005, okay, wow, okay. So anyway, 2001, graduate fall 2001. You know what happens in 2001? 9/11 happened just like the second week of my first couple weeks in my first semester in college. I went to UNC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Well, my depression's getting worse and worse and worse. You know, there's a lot going on in the world. Things are just really, really changing. And my drug use is getting worse. You know, the pot stopped working like it used to. Painkillers aren't working as well. I just needed more and more. And meanwhile, if you have a lot of serious mental health issues and you're not actually getting quality help and you're just like self-medicating with like, you know, maybe like doing oxys and smoking pot every day and occasionally drinking, maybe like tripping on acid maybe once a month and then like doing ecstasy every other weekend, you're not going to get better, you're going to get consistent, you know, very much worse. And I did get worse. And so, you know, that solution of the drugs and pot and all of that stuff became very much a problem. So I dropped out of college after my first semester and I went to, you know, Mardi Gras, New Orleans in February on my birthday, partied it up there. 3 weeks later, I went on a huge cocaine binge on it. 3 weeks later, total psychotic break. Like I lost my mind, like delusional, making things up in my head. Like I was just completely detached from reality. So I needed to be hospitalized. So I go to the psych ward, and there, while I'm there, and it's like this kind of psychotic, like bipolar psychotic episode, and I crash, like I just come down, and it was hell. It was absolute utter hell. Get out of the hospital after a week, go home, dreadfully, I mean, more suicidal than I ever could have ever been. I had to go back to the hospital. And the second week in the hospital, they kind of get me on like anti-anxiety, and whatever they put me on, it kind of was like the first little bit of relief that I felt because I was just having constant panic attacks since that episode. So it was just constant panic. So they put me on this, and I started to feel like just a tiny bit normal. And I knew that I needed to get so clean sober. Like they had people come in from 12-step programs, like where like they would come in and all that stuff. Like the people who had different drug and alcohol problems, they would pick us out as a group and put us in a room, and then the people would tell us about their stories. And so I just knew I needed to get help, and I needed to get, but it wasn't weird to me. Like I was like, yeah, obviously I've been using drugs since 12, and like I can't stop, and I use every day. And clearly that's, I'm sure I need to do that. So I actually got out, and I get sober. 20 years old, I get sober. Ended up relapsing after a couple of years, but I kept going back. I go to AA and stayed in the program, get sober. So I've been sober for close to 20 years now. So I get really involved in, I get involved in AA. I not in school anymore. I go into hairdressing. I said, what forget I did. Go hairdressing. No, but I actually kind of really just fell into it. Like I was very creative, and I was like drunk so yeah, this is when had relapsed, started with heroin, and I was drunk, and I was in the grocery store, run into an old friend from high school. And she's like, what are you doing? And I had just gotten kicked out of my house again. I had gotten fired from my waiting job. And I was like, oh, I'm thinking about helpful again. And she's like, well, I'm doing an apprenticeship, hairstyling apprenticeship. Why don't you come and join me, whatever. I'm like, all right. So I do that, and 3 months later is when I ended up getting sober and getting my life together. So meanwhile, I'm getting my life together, getting sober. Is anybody like so done listening to me, or you guys okay? We're still okay? We're good. Okay, cool. Because I know I can get kind of windy, but this is just because I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get there. So I get sober, and so meanwhile, I'm not. I think in my head, I do eventually want to go back to school because I did always want to get into journalism and writing and all that kind of stuff. But I'm trying to get my life together. Like being sober when you are crazy and you got OCD, you've got scrupulosity, you're gay, you've never dealt with anything, you've never dealt with growing up in, Christian fundamentalism and the character, nothing. If you're being bullied, any of this stuff, suddenly you have to live every day sober, and it's not fun. And you have a lot of work to do, mentally, spiritually, physically, all of these things. So the hairdressing actually kind of turned out to be a good thing because it was like, okay, this is just something that I'll do. And so I kind of just started developing this career as I'm going along. I didn't really like it very much. I liked the creative aspect of it, but people are different. And so, and when you're dealing with vanity and you're dealing with different personalities, and then they also, want you to be their therapist and all of these things. And there was a lot of moving parts. And I'm a perfectionist, and I wanted to excel, and I did end up excelling like that. But it was very draining, and trying to. But I ended up developing like a really lucrative career in hairstyling. So I was getting better, getting my life together. Hairstylist, move on my own, supporting myself, getting my rent, having friends, sober 5 years, 6 years, getting And then I meet a guy who's now my husband. And prior to that, I was like, marriage, antiquated institution. People started at the time we met in 2011, so people were talking about like the possibility of gay marriage and same-sex marriage and legalized and stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. For people that want to do that, that's great. Hopefully for them, that'll happen. For me, I don't have any intention whatsoever. But then I met him, and a few months later, we were very much fell quickly. And 3 months later, we really did. I was like, I want to marry this person. I want to commit to this person. And it was very weird because it was kind of like, it felt serendipitous. There was, right around that time, the Maryland State Legislature passed the same-sex marriage law in Maryland. So January 2012, the legislature passes it, but with a caveat, because to get conservative support for this bill, they said it would not go into effect until January 2013. Are you guys familiar with the referendums? Okay, so it won't go into effect until January 1st, 2013. That way, conservatives in the state, if they get enough signatures, I think they need to maybe 150,000 or whatever, but they're going to get that in a second. If they can get enough signatures to get this on the ballot, then voters can vote to overturn this measure in November at the November 2012 election, when Obama was up for re-election against Romney. And so they were like, okay, so they passed it knowing they were like, there's no way, we're obviously going to have the support and we'll be able to overturn it with the ballot box. So now I have this hat in the ring, and I'm kind of like, oh, this means something to me. And so I started thinking, and I remember like a client who was like super, super political. Like she was a woman who was she was like a lobbyist or something. She's like, what are you doing to get involved? And I was like, oh, I don't know. She's like, you're not doing anything? And I thought to myself, I guess maybe I should do something. Let me see it. And there was like an organization, Equality Maryland, like the gay and lesbian organization, and an offshoot called Marylanders for Marriage Equality. And they started organizing to pass question 6. That was the question. It ended up, question 6 on the ballot in November 2012 was, do you want to vote to uphold this law so gays can get married? And it's a new law that just passed, gays can get married, or do you want to overturn it? So it was like, the campaign was like, vote yes on question 6. Meanwhile, this campaign is going on in 2 other states, in Washington and Maine as well, and then in the 4th state there, I think it was Wisconsin, if I remember it was weird. Anyway, but in 3 states, it was people voting in the ballot box for same-sex marriage. And it passed in all 3 states. So it was the first time that by public vote, it passed in the ballot box, right? We won like 52 to 48%. I was like sure we were going to lose. I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. Like, obviously, there's more conservative support, and also I'm evil, I'm going to hell, and God hates me anyway. And like, just all that stuff kind of drilled into me and in my bones. Like, it's so deep, I was just like, this is not going to happen. Well, we ended up winning that measure. and then it went in all those states, and it really was a perspective changer for me, because here I am, 28 years old, and I'm thinking, oh, well, I saw what organizing that, like, what, you know, that kind of can do. But it wasn't even just that, it was more like, oh, maybe I'm not going to, like, maybe God doesn't hate me as much as I thought. Like, you know, I started making all these kind of religious connections, you know, like one does, where I'm thinking like, oh, you know, clearly God hates me, so he's going to make this not legal, and then it's going to be hard for da. And then it just have the opposite happen, where we win, and like it wins in each state, and there's all these different. It was like, wow. I was like, maybe things are going to get better, and maybe, you know, it was just really shifted my perspective. But what it also did was it kind of got me on fire for social justice. I was like, had experienced a high that I hadn't experienced since I first committed like this. And I was like, I want to keep chasing this feeling. I want to keep chasing this feeling. What's next on the agenda? So I'm like, oh, I'm going to get involved with this, I get involved with this, I get involved with it. It just really changed things for me. And so, 2013, there was like an anti-discrimination bill for transgender legislation. So it was like to add gender identity to the discrimination law, so that transgender people would not, you know, it would be illegal to fire transgender people and to deny them housing, that kind of thing. And it didn't pass that year, but I ended up talking to some senators, trying to lobby for that to get it to happen and go to rallies and stuff, but it didn't pass, so it ended up passing the following year. Anyway, I'm just like, you know, okay, so that's the next movement in this thing, sure, like, I'll do it. I just became very much like, I don't know really what any of this means, but okay, these folks are marginalized, I'm gonna battle, I'm gonna fight for whoever is marginalized, whoever tells me is marginalized, you know, a victim, I'm gonna fight for them. And it was just like my new calling. And what it was it satisfied this feeling of righteousness that I hadn't felt since I was in the land of God community. Like this feeling of, I'm on like the right path again. Like I have a purpose, I'm one of the good guys again. Because finding this new community of social justice advocates, it was like, it was my new community, it was my new faith community. And it was thrilling, and it made me feel like I finally found the community again. And I finally found like my calling, and I was good, right? And I'm one of the good guys. And we all know who the bad guys are. The bad guys are the Republicans. The bad guys are, you know, I mean, whatever. You know, like Obama's God. And, you know, the devil is Mitt Romney in 2012, and then, you know, it was like, whatever. You know, so it's just all these things. I mean, that's where I was coming from, and that's the folks that I was, you know, keeping company with, you know? And how it worked, but it was, you know, angry diatribes on Facebook, you know, oh, this, oh, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, social media was kind of just coming off then, so you can imagine, like, it's like earlier, its infancy, people were bonkers on Facebook. People are crazier now, but you know, it was just like that was the space to do all that. And so I was like, I got married in 2014. A couple months later, I'm out to dinner with my husband. I said, I want to go back to school. I wanted to do more. I want to be an activist. I want to be a writer. I want to be an LGBTQ plus journalist, you know, and do all these things, and I want to continue to make a difference. And he was like, are you seem to go for it? So I went to community college for a year, because I was like, I'm gonna finish my degree. And while I'm in community college, and I love it. So I'm working full time, and I'm going to community college part time, taking like English courses and history courses and starting to learn again, just like loving it. I'm like, oh my God, like just I was so hungry for knowledge and wanting to really do this. And then I learned about this program at Columbia School of General Studies. It's one of the 4 undergraduate schools. There's CC, Columbia College, the STEM school, CEAS, there's the Barnard, which is the women's college right across the street. Anyway, there's these, and it's one of just the 4 undergraduate schools. So what attracted me to that program was, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get in. If I can get in there, I'm gonna get an Ivy League education. I'm gonna be, because they matriculate all of the non-traditional students in. So you're in the same class, like I would be at 33, would be sitting in the same class, like first years, so you raise from here. So fourth year, whoever, I would be in the same classroom as you. So like you would look behind and there would be like maybe like a couple 30-year-olds, maybe even like a 50-year-old, and like I know maybe you have something like that here, I'm not sure. But in Columbia, everybody's matriculated in, and it actually started post World War II is when it really kind of took off because GIs whose education had been interrupted, they created this where they were like, okay, let's get them back on academic track and they can finish their degrees. And so, and then it kind of opened up. So then it was like actors and like ballerinas and then like, you know, people like me and then like, you know, all these things. So just people from all walks of life. And it was competitive, but I worked my ass off for a year and I was like, I really want to get into this program and do this. New York is the place to be. I want to be a writer and journalism, all the things that I want to do. Obviously, and my husband is an attorney in trademark law, and he can work anywhere in the States. So so he's like, yeah, I love New York, but you can do that, get in. So I get in 2016, defer first semester. I was going to start fall 2016, but I defer first semester to save a little bit more money. And then I would start in January 2017. Trump wins the election in 2016. Some folks might have been happy about that. And at the time I was not happy about that at all. I was very, very devastated because remember, I was in this path of like, oh, I found my community and like also thinking that, you know, oh, God loves me because all of these changes are happening with equality and you know, all of these things that are happening along the way that's kind of telling me, proving to me, like, you know, that I'm good, that I'm not bad, that I'm not evil, that I'm not a sinner. So then suddenly when Trump comes along, and it's kind of just a very different message. And you know, like Pence, all these things, which is a very different vibe. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, all this is going to be taken away. And it kind of did something to like, you know, mentally to me. It kind of like made me a little nuts and just really, really depressed. And so I kind of, you know, shut down a little bit. But I thought, well, here I'm going to go to like the most uber progressive like place in the universe, be kumbaya with all my people. Like at least there's that. At least there's that. And I'm going to become the most educated, most effective activist, and I'm going to hashtag resist, and I am going to be like, you aren't even ready for it. And I'm just going to just you know, light the world on fire, to be this social justice like superhero. So I go to the school, and I'm thrilled to be there. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my luck, you know, sitting in these classrooms, and it was just a really thrilling opportunity, something that I never thought would be possible for myself. It cost like $2 million. And I'll pay it probably till long after I'm dead, but you know, it was a privilege, and any school is a privilege, and I was just very lucky at 33 years old, recovering drug addict, heroin addict, you know, surviving all these things to be able to suddenly kind of get a second chance at education. And I'm an exceller, so I just like take off, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm interning glad my first summer there, and I'm you know, just really like geared up. Well, I'm a liberal guy, but what I discovered very quickly is that I'm a far right, right winger, borderline Nazi. That I discovered that pretty quickly on campus, because I was, what I did not realize, I was not really super into the whole project of like dismantling Western civilization, kind of like burning it all to the ground and like building in its place some kind of like socialist utopia. Now, I'm not an economist, okay? So I didn't really know a lot about Marxism. I didn't really know, I wasn't like, oh, wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a capitalist, I'm like a hardcore capitalist, you know, but all these ideas that I started learning about day after day, I'm taking courses like contemporary Islamic civilization, I'm taking courses like reading some human rights and Muslim masculinities and the LGBT history and with like all these humanities courses, which is where I learned most of my time. And I'm starting to kind of learn and kind of realized that, there was obviously history and you're learning, there are things being taught, but there's like a kind of a bent to it. Like, how underwriting all of this is a mission. Like, this isn't, what I came to understand was that things were being taught through the lens of critical theory. People hear about critical theory, it's become this kind of hot topic, where, oh my gosh, critical theory, critical race theory, is it in the room with us right now? But it really was present everywhere. Everything was kind of taught through that lens. That was kind of fueling and just kind of the pedagogy on campus was, traditional theory, sociology, like studying society, it's studying society and like how it is. So just looking at things how they are and kind of taking, inventory, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, trying to improve society, but based on how people really are, how humans really are, how society really is. Critical theory takes a different approach. Critical theory kind of wants to reevaluate or relitigate history, everything we understand and know to be true, to be real. So whatever you want to say. I mean, for me, the gender thing was a big thing when I started learning that, like, oh, there's such thing as the sex binary, or we're not getting multiple species, well, that's kind of weird. All these things, and kind of, there's very much like these ideas where we'll relitigate this, and we'll kind of reformulate how we think about society to rebuild it and reimagine it in our image, in the image that we know is the right image, which is anti-capitalist, free from capital, free from cis hetero patriarchy, free from that, and it's really just kind of this quasi-Marxist approach. So I did learn about economics, I did learn about Marxism, I did learn about all of these things because I realized that I'm being taught this, and this is the basis for everything that I'm learning. Okay, so I had a lot of work to do because I hadn't been in school for a long time, but I'm like learning all this stuff, and I am 33, so I have my full frontal lobe that's like fully developed. So I am able to kind of like think a little bit critically. Now, mind you, I did not enter this space like I know what I think, like I was there to like be educated. Like I was malleable. I was, I knew that I didn't know everything. I mean, I had a position, I had life experience, but I was also, tell me, who am I to say anything, to talk back? But in the back of my head, as I'm sitting there in these classrooms, I'm thinking like, that sounds kind of backwards to me. Or I'm thinking, that actually sounds kind of regressive to me. Or, okay, so I come from a place where it's like we judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, and that actually worked for me. Like growing up, I had always had friends of all different races, and it was like never a thing. I never really thought about it so much. I mean, I was aware, I wasn't the people that was like, I wasn't like, oh, I don't see color, but and I understood what racism was, but it wasn't the first thing I thought about when I was talking to somebody. I wasn't like evaluating how I was going to respond to what they were saying, or evaluating what they were telling me based on the color of their skin. It was just someone I'm talking to, my friend or whoever I'm dating, whatever it was, and we're hanging out, we're talking, I'm just listening to them. If we're arguing, we're arguing. If we're hanging out, we're getting along, if we're agreeing, if we're disagreeing, whatever. It doesn't matter because it's about what they think and not about anything else. And so suddenly I'm in this space where suddenly race was like it was like the first thing that you were supposed to consider when you saw someone or understood someone. So it was almost like I found it being a kind of suggested that in classroom discussions and seminar and so on, if a Black student has something to say, an opinion, I kind of have to evaluate what they're saying on a different scale. Because if I disagree, if I think, oh, I don't really think that's right, or I actually disagree with that, I have to be like, well, actually, I don't really know. Because they're Black and I'm white, and I have white privilege. And this is coming from a place of just totally unknowability, because because black people are just completely unknowable, and they're just, complete, and so I have to, if I disagree, then if something wrong with, then maybe I need to rethink this. I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut and just, and smile and nod and say, oh yes, that's right, I agree. Because there's to me, over time, I was like, that's hardcore racist. That to me, in my book, in my belief system, that's racist. So it was dehumanizing. If someone of a different race, color, creed, a trans person, if someone had an idea, like if we're talking about economics, if we're talking about, Justin Bieber, if we're talking about whatever, and they start talking to me about an opinion they have, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I agree or I disagree, I'm going to give them the respect of saying out loud or speaking to them and treating them like a human being, like, oh, actually, I don't think so, but like, why do you think that, or like, whatever, and having a conversation like we're both human beings, like we're both individuals, not kind of putting on kids' gloves and treating them as if, they need special care, that they need special coddling, that it's one thing to be anti-racist and be like, okay, yeah, I hate racism, and equality, and we should all have equal opportunity. But it's a whole other thing to look at people who are different individuals and just judge them by those things, and to kind of look at everyone through the lens of that. And that's where this was leading, by teaching these things through this lens, this critical theory lens. And I'm going to speed up here. Queer theory was kind of the critical theory and post-colonial theory. Those were the theories that I was really, really geared into, because I was taking these courses, like again, for Islamic civilization, so everything, those were kind of the basis. But with critical theory, all of, whether it's critical race theory, post-colonial theory, queer theory, it's all essentially kind of the same thing. They deal with different disciplines. So like queer theory will obviously deal with like gay and lesbian history, gender and sexuality, let's say. And then if you're talking about post-colonial theory, it'll be like about the Israel-Palestine conflict, or it'll be like South African apartheid and colonialism and whatever. And all of these critical race theories, rethinking the social construction of race and blah, blah, blah. And so, but it's all kind of the same thing at its core, because the through line is that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So let's say post-colonial fears, let's say like super, super hardcore, anti-Israel activists who are like, they hate the West, not everyone, but let's say they're very geared into like hating America, the West, imperialism, militarism, et cetera, right? Not their enemy. Well, who else hates them? Queer radicals, because queer radicals are like cis hetero patriarchy, capitalism. I mean, everybody, it's pretty much like capitalism, cis people, hetero people, white people, whiteness, all of these things. That's our enemy. We're all against that. So that's how we'll approach. That's going to fuel how we think about history, how we think about issues going on right now. And the great thing about it is, with postmodernism and all of these theories, because we believe that language pretty much constructs reality, forms reality, we can kind of just change the rules. So, we can be like, that no longer means that. That doesn't mean that anymore. And if we start putting that out into the universe and just pumping these ideas out, we can effectively just like change how people are thinking about things. So it's like suddenly in a very, very quick succession, you're having people think very differently about sex and gender. You're having people think very differently about a lot of different things. And it works, and it works really, really well. And it can be really effective, especially when it kind of is happening in the institutions, academic institutions, culturally, film, media, all that kind of stuff. And that was what was going on. And so the through line is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it's all the same mission. It's just kind of this anti-capitalist mission and anti-Western mission. Now, again, I'm very critical of the West. I'm sure everybody in this room has criticism of their country. That's what makes America awesome, is that we can criticize how it works, how it functions. We can criticize our government. We criticize, different political parties, our own political party, approaches to things. Like, that's what's great, and that's what makes us get to a better place. That we need debate, we need different ideas, we need conservatives, we need liberals, we need centrists, we need different people coming together. But at the bottom of that, like, what is it always? Well, at the very least, what we all need to agree on is the American project. At the very least, like the Western, like, we need to, like, one thing we all have to kind of agree on is like, yeah, and I also don't want to burn America down. Like, I actually believe in the vision of America, which is like this country that we've built, and where people are free, where we have this democracy, where people can have different faiths, different, different walks of life, different and we're trying to just all get along and all, live, copacetically and have this cohesive society where people are protected, people are safe, we're safe from ourselves, we're protected from ourselves, we have laws, all of this stuff. But at the bottom of it, but what happened is that suddenly there's this kind of working, in institutions and universities and stuff where it's like, well, actually, they don't really agree. Like that basic thing that needs to be kind of at the very bottom core of this, no, it's actually death to America, death to the West. And so, well, where do we go from there? Like what happens next? Where do we go from there? And how can we get to this place where we're still all working together and we can kind of have, bipartisanship and work across political divides? And how can there be when suddenly like the sides are just going further and further and further apart? And it's like Newton's third law, which is, it's kind of like for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So, the left does this, and then the right's going to be like boom, and it's going to hit it back this way, and the left's going to be like boom, and it's going to be like this. And so eventually you have like the left and the right, like leaves a huge chasm. Okay, and then folks getting more radical, and then like all the rest of, I would say us or anyone, kind of just ping-ponging back and forth and being like, okay, I guess we'll just have to sit back and watch everyone just kind of do their thing. Now, for me, the concern became the left because I was formerly left-wing, like I considered myself a left-winger, and so I was like, if anybody's going to criticize it, it's going to be me because this is the world that I know. And so I see this getting completely derailed, and I am concerned here. I know what the reaction is going to be from the right. I know where these things lead. I know what I know that if we're talking about queerness and queering things and, the Queer Art of Failure, which is a book by a professor at Columbia, which is pretty much like, oh, queerness is like, it's cool to fail. Like, let's leave, like success is what white people do. Success is what Republicans do. Success is what capitalists do. To prove our own thesis that capitalism is evil and doesn't work, we are going to, if we start struggling, we're going to actually encourage and continue to fail, just to manifest that and to prove that, yeah, it's capitalism that doesn't work. Because we are clear, we're living outside of that construct. That construct of like, you need to get all these, you need to get A's and you need to have these internships and do this and make money and have a job. You need to abide by the law, not steal. You need to have health insurance. All these things, and it even becomes the little things like the way that language is, like, oh, grammar. That's a Western construct, like how you're supposed to say you are is Y-O-U-R-E'-R-E instead of your. But let's rethink that. Like, who came up with that? Oh, white men. So let's really kind of, it's just reevaluating this, but it really does become about like all of like the minutia. It just becomes very tedious, and it really affects information. everything, right? And it's just this kind of like, and so to me, I'm thinking like, I did not sign up for, I tried queer. It landed me in, I was very queer. I was doing LSD, and I was living that life. It ended up in the psych ward. I was suicidal. I was freaking bananas. And you know what? I got sober and I got my life together. I didn't insist on being a victim. I actually insisted on surviving and getting better. And I rebuilt my mental health. I got a career. I paid for my bills. I did all these things. And then when I saw something that I felt like, I needed to reform, and there's all these different opinions about like same-sex marriage and whether people agree, and people don't agree with that, it's perfectly fine with me. In fact, I kind of like talking more interested in hearing other people's opinions about that right now. It's totally fine. But for me at the time, I thought, oh, so I'm going to work within the system, in this democracy, to make things, to change things and to work things better. I'm not going to burn everything. I'm not going to say like screw straight people and screw your system of marriage, which props up capitalism. Screw this, screw the military. No, we're going to fight for gays being able to serve in the military and for them to be able to marry and so on. And in this system, whereas from this post-colonial or queer theorist perspective, it's actually no. We don't want to place the table. We want to flip the table. We don't want to work within the system and improve it. We want to destroy the system and resurrect in its place something where we're the norm, or queer is the norm. Okay, and so that's essentially what that project is. So meanwhile, after marriage, gets legalized, I'm in these spaces, in these LGBT activist spaces. I realized that this is a word that's been going on within those spaces for a very long time, and I was completely unaware. I thought we were all on the same page, right? But no, there were a lot of people who called themselves queer rather than just, gay, because gay and lesbian is kind of like a Western, so queer. And they were like, okay, you got what you wanted. Now get out of the way, and we're gonna kind of come back to the home again. 60s, 70s, we're bringing in stuff. So now it's like radical. Now you can serve in the military. Congratulations. Now you can get married and have a job where you go 9 to 5 and then just die. Congratulations. Do you know what I mean? Like this kind of perspective. Now we're going to get back to what our project was, this career project. And I did not know that there was this huge, I thought that left wing and liberal was gay marriage, no. That was centrist scum. That was conservative, essentially. You're a cis white gay, right? You're so cis, that's so white, that's so gay. You are an antiquated relic of the past, thinking about things from a different perspective and holding onto this old view. You need to get the hell out of the way and make way. And if you do not agree, if there's something in your heart that doesn't necessarily think this is right, if you're confused, if you're coming to it, then you know what? We're going to push you out. We're going to shut you. We're going to slowly get you away. We're going to exile you, right? You're a doubter. You are an infidel, and you're not on this side. Essentially, that's where the book title comes from, the making of a heretic, the making of a gender heretic, because suddenly I had come from this place where growing up in this Christian cult and getting separated from this community, the community that I had known, finding a new community in social justice, being this good person again, and then suddenly, because I'm not saying death to America, I am not, and I'm not saying I'm queer, I'm just still saying I'm gay, I'm still saying whatever, that I am not a true believer. I'm not pure. I'm not good, right? And obviously we see some of these things. You might be familiar if there's Republicans or conservatives or coming from those spaces. You might be familiar with different ways this manifests with the right among conservatives, where there's a way to think about this everything, and it's almost like you might think, I don't necessarily entirely agree with that approach or think about that, but there's a pressure to kind of conform or say, so you can kind of see where this manifests. Dogma and fundamentalism can kind of manifest in any kind of space where there's hierarchies, where there's leadership, where there's religion, politics, anything. It's dogma, and and so it takes away from our individualism and from our own personal freedoms and being able to think and speak for ourselves, and it stifles us. It's meant to keep everyone in line, to get this group thing going. And then suddenly, when you have like a different thing, and you hear someone say it, you're like, thank you so much for saying that, because I've been thinking that same thing, and I thought I was crazy. I thought I was so crazy. When I'm stifling these feelings and these dissent, and I'm going home every day, and I'm thinking I'm a horrible person, I'm becoming more and more depressed. I'm becoming crazy. I'm thinking, and I don't want anybody to know, I'm becoming paranoid. Like, if someone finds out that I think this, if someone all of these things, and then suddenly, I find this new community of people that are actually speaking and saying all these things where I disagree with them. There are a lot of folks in here that would have ideas that maybe I disagree with. I don't know. I mean, look, I didn't vote in the last election. I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but like, I'm willing to hear about different, perspectives about conservatism, about like where I like listening to what people have to say. I'm more just interested now in people's differences of opinions. And it doesn't mean anything about my spirit, my moral, anything about me as a person. If someone disagrees with I'm still here. I still exist. I'm still, and it's fine. And we can have these differences, and it helps. It's good. It empowers all of us. It makes me stronger. It makes you stronger. But at the bottom of all of this, we need to at least agree that, yeah, we need to kind of keep the American project going. Like, we don't really want to burn it. Like, we want to see this continue to work, because this is the best thing that the world has seen, that actually we've been able to put together in all of like the kind of systems, whether it's feudalism or monarchies or anything. This has led to like the most success, getting people out of poverty, creating opportunity for people, innovation. We're pretty all right. Obviously not perfect, but we're doing okay. So you know what? Probably need to keep prisons open. Like, we really do probably need to imprison people that, because if it's just completely every American Wild West, then things are probably going to get really screwy pretty quickly. We're protected. Our laws are there to protect us from ourselves, etc. So I will wrap up. Because we have to close, and I've been listening to you guys have been so attentive, and I really appreciate it. But I was talking with Jordan. A lot of my book is about, and when I say like the making of the gender heretic, even though my book is about a lot of different things, whether it's about faith and religion, post-colonial theory, but all of these different things, I say gender heretic because I told you I was a really girly kid, right? And when I got into activism, and I was like, I want to help kind of build a world where, there's always going to be girly boys, like a minority of kids, boys that are just like super, super femme, super girly. Like, we all know, you know what I mean? Like, you see them and they're a little, I'm not going to use the word, but like, I will use the word. But anyway, or like, girls that are more butch or whatever, and you're like, there's a minority. And you think like, yeah, the kid's, sissy, whatever he is. But hey, let's not kick the shit out of him, right? Or let's not tell him every day how horrible he is, like the way that he walks, or how he talks, or his interests. Like, he likes fashion, that's okay. Like, we need fashion, like, we need that. Like, hey, everybody wears threads. Like, we need, like, people to, whatever. Let's try to create a world where it's not like this whole thing where, like, everybody needs to, like, walk around this gender non-conforming kid and just keep the distance, like, oh, God, you're amazing. Oh, my God, look at you. Yes, sled, right? But to also just be like, well, you're also not going to kill them. Just be like, yeah, whatever, they're just a person. I'm not like that. And they're obviously abnormal. They're really, because they're not the norm. They're a minority. And that's perfectly okay. Just like, and it's going to be, and then we kind of just make space for that. So kids, if they're coming up and they're like, I'm so different, I feel so alone. Yeah, there's going to be some bullying, and yeah, kids are good, but that's how it is because you kind of bully the outsider, right? You develop who you are by kind of figuring out who's looking out. But parents or teacher, whoever can just be like, look, I get it. Yeah, there aren't a lot of people like you. I get you're really not like a lot of the other boys. Believe me, you're not alone. It might feel like that right now, but you're not. There's other folks out there that are like you. Now, this is totally apart from sexuality, because this is like, this is just kids. Like, this doesn't mean it now, but what we always understood was, yeah, this kid probably will grow up to be gay, maybe, whatever. Or yeah, this girl will probably grow up to be a butch lesbian, whatever. Like, whatever. It's not really thinking about that. It's just like, they're just different right now. Let's just put him in drama, or let's just put him in an art class, and it's fine. What started happening is that I started seeing people talking really differently about it. They were like, oh, little boys where are they on the gender scale? Maybe they're a different gender. Maybe this actually means that they're not male, that they're actually on the inside, they're female, like they're actually born in the wrong body. There's something defective about that. And so rather than the approach of being like, let's expand what's possible for men and women, and just because this little boy is like super girly and he doesn't like things that are typical for boys, that it makes him any less of a boy. No, he's male. People are male and female. Obviously, the building block of life, right? And it's why we exist, and it's very, very consequential to our health, to our development. Sex differences are real. Just how it is. Women are more typical to be one way, men are because everyone is more, all women are like this. It doesn't mean all men are like this, but there is, sex differences are real, and there is norms within these groups. And there's atypicality. And so, suddenly it was, actually there's something wrong. And suddenly I started learning that out of the 80s, 90s, out of the crazy, God bless them, the Dutch, in Amsterdam, these clinics were like, wow, these people who have transitioned, these adults, especially trans women, so males who have transitioned to live as women, they're super, super unhappy. Like, they're not really functioning very well. They're not having relationships, and they're not really functioning in society. Like, they seem to be happier, but they're not functioning well. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they don't pass the opposite sex. Well, there's something called precocious puberty, and there's something called puberty blockers. And they've been used to precocious puberty, if a kid would start going through puberty literally like 5, 6, really, really early, they developed these agonists that would stop the hormones from continuing this, so they would just be able to stay on the same kind of timeline as their peers, right? And very, very small group. I mean, this is like not a lot of people at all, but this was available to them. And so these people thought, what if trans kids, what if someone comes to us and says, oh, if a little male who's 3 says, I'm a girl, and we say, oh my gosh, thank you for telling me, 3-year-old. Well, yes, you are a girl. And what makes you a girl? Oh, you like pink, and you like dresses, and you want to hang out with the girls, and you like long hair. Clearly, that's what makes a girl a girl. That was what makes a female. So let's go along with this. And then when it comes to the time where you're starting to develop, rather than masculinizing and going through puberty and developing all of these traits that are going to make you not be able to disguise yourself in the future. Like, you're going to have to do all these surgeries, whether it's facial reconstruction, all of these things, but you know what? Your shoulders are always going to be broader. You're always going to be, well, if we can just stunt your puberty and we can stop you from maturing and stop you from growing, and then just block that, so completely cut off your value of testosterone, and then just feed you estrogen, we can prevent all of that maturity and masculinization, and you'll have a chance of passing as the opposite sex, and you'll be happier. Well, it's complicated, right? Because it's like, first of all, it's fucking crazy. But two, how do you tell who a real trans? How do you tell between me, girly kids like me, who wanted to be like the girls, was always like the girls, and was like, you know, I'm evil, I hate myself, I hate how I am, I hate who I am. If I'm singled out and I'm put in that, and they're like, you know what, maybe you really are a girl. And I'm thinking like, oh, this isn't a spiritual defect, this is just a medical defect that can be fixed. Well, then suddenly, it's not about making more space for gender nonconforming, or not making more space for gender nonconforming where everybody can be, but just for understanding that there will always be a minority of people, because we're human beings and we're varied, that are going to be different, that are going to be gay. You know, they're going to be a little butch, they're going to be a little faggy, whatever. Excuse my French, but I use that word. I'm getting loud. So, you know, there's always going to be that. So what can we do about that? Let's, rather than saying, okay, let's stunt their puberty, let's keep them from growing into healthy adults, let's have them change everything about themselves, about their bodies, about who they are, and disguise who they are and try to live as, and disguise as the opposite sex. You know, who knows what this does to the brain, what this does to psychosocial development, what this does to anything, but you know what? They're going to pass. And we know that that's the only thing that matters. And also, we're very, very confident that we can decipher between kids like Ben and the other kid who is going to grow up and always want to live as the opposite sex, or attempt to live as the opposite sex, or really desire to do that. And we're that confident. No problem. I did not agree with that. I was like, that's absolutely batshit crazy. And sure, there might be people that grow up that decide, you know, okay, I still want to attempt to live, you know, as it, but, you know, this is so antithetical to what I thought we were doing. I thought we were trying to make what was possible for males bigger. I thought we were trying to make what was possible for females bigger. I don't want to tell a little kid that because he likes Barbie that he might be make him a girl, or if a girl because she likes short hair and prefers football and hates ballet and wants to wear pants and hates dresses and all this stuff, that like, oh, we can actually make this happen. You know, like just, and again, part of this queering of everything, this deconstructing of everything, this rethinking, relitigating, sex isn't real. Sex is a construct. Sex is homosexuality, sex, all of this is just language. It's just things that we've made up and constructed. We can rework this. We can rethink this. Sex, maybe not just gender is a spectrum, maybe sex is a spectrum. You know, maybe, okay, yes, so there's, you know, genitals and there's, you know, chromosomes and all these things, and yes, there are only two gametes. There are small gametes, sperm, and large gametes, ova, you know, females, ova, male sperm. There's only two gametes, no intermediate gamete. So yeah, there's this binary, okay? But maybe if someone doesn't have testosterone in their body and they have a penis and they are getting on an estrogen level that's like typical of a female, well, that makes them actually female. Maybe sex is really a spectrum because maybe it has more to do with like hormonal rather than anything else. And suddenly you're starting to rethink all of these things, and oh, and so we're just going to clear this, and it's part of this greater project, like I said earlier, of like rethinking all of this stuff to kind of cripple what we've been working towards and building, and kind of just slowly just take away from the bricks of it and dismantle it, just to make it that much easier to kind of knock down. And rebuild in this place, what, maybe like a socialist utopia, maybe where we're all genderless, maybe where everybody has this autonomy where they can just be and look, you know, maybe nobody goes through, who knows what this is? We really don't know. We just know that what's working right now is evil, and we need to burn it down and resurrect something better in this place. So 5 minutes left, but, and we went late, and we were supposed to stop earlier. Got carried away. That is essentially where I'm coming from. as a kind of heretical person, as a kind of person that finds himself living out of pretty much every group and doesn't really have a community anymore. But my new community is actually free thinkers who are not afraid to disagree and dissent and have different, and it's actually pretty awesome and really, really fun because it puts me in rooms with people like you. I mean, I get to be, there are a lot of folks that you probably would know, conservatives, that I'm actually very, very close friends with, that you would be like, holy shit, how do you know that person? But, you know, and because it's like, there are folks that are standing out from everyone else and being like, yeah, I'm going to say what everybody else is afraid to say. It's terrifying. There's been nothing fun about any of what I've thought. When I read about it in my book, and George read it, it wasn't like oh, this has been a cinch from the beginning. No, it's been horrible. Like, I've been exiled, I've been burned, I've been talked about, I had to leave my MFA program, the DEI did this whole investigation because I wrote a paper. I mean, all of this stuff, okay? And I'm still that kid that's like, I need community, I want community, I want to feel good. And I want to feel like I'm right, like I'm okay, like I'm not going to burn in hell, like I'm not evil. And so now, those are the spaces that I am not trying to gain access to. The spaces where entry entry depends on me agreeing and repeating a dogma and repeating and saying what everybody thinks and what I need to believe and what I need to do to gain acceptance in that space. That's my talk. That's where I'm coming from. Take with that what you will. Maybe some of that's resonated with some of you. You're all in college right now. You're all trying to navigate this. It can be a really great experience for you, and it is. I hope it continues to be. But there you go. Before we wrap up, just anybody, thank you for staying late. Does anybody have any questions before we go?
First of all, thank you so much for speaking to us. You're extremely well spoken, like best speaker I think we've had here, public publications. So my background in my to do a little bit. I have 2 moms, they're married to each other.
Okay.
So I think my question is, with so many, I guess, like barriers to entry for conservatives, I guess how do you see, like for example, when you were going to your class at Columbia and you came home, like, what was your husband's opinion on all what you came away from that?
That's a good question. Well, I'll answer it. Do you have a follow-up question?
I'll follow up.
Okay. So it was interesting because, you know, we had come from this place, so I'm like coming home and I'm starting to sound like kind of MAGA. Like he's starting to be like, he's like listening to me and I'm able to explain myself. But there were some things where he was like, oh, like, what? You know, and he didn't really get it, but he's, you know, he's a smart guy and he's not going to be like, oh my God, you need to get out of here, you know? But he's like, that's what? And guess what he did? So he was like, oh, you want to go to school, got another degree? I always wanted to go back and get a psychology degree, master's in psychology. I'm going to go, and guess where he went? Went to NYU, to their master's program, in their master's in mental health counseling, and they have an LGBTQ certificate program. Well, after a semester in that program, he ended up graduating and he got his degree, and he's a licensed therapist now. But he only needed a very, very short few weeks in that to be like, holy shit, I know what you have been telling me about for the past 3 years. Now I see it. I get it. Crazy. Absolutely insane. These people are nuts. And no, hell no, I would never send anybody to them for therapy. My God. But anyway, he's like, yeah, that's all I needed to see. And then when he saw what I had gone, when I started going through getting kind of like canceled out of this MFA program and all this stuff, he was like, this is nuts. So yeah, I mean, we don't agree on everything by any means, but who does? And that's fine. And my mind's not made up about everything. His isn't either. I mean, it really, really isn't. When I say like I'm not an economist, I'm not an economist. I don't know if you guys notice this, but like, do you notice how like when something happens in the world, everybody has just like a settled opinion that they just know? Like they're like, boom, tariffs. I know that they're not going to, and here's why, and I'm going to be like, I didn't know what a tariff was until like 3 months ago. But how does everyone have a fully formed opinion about this, right? It's kind of like that. Like I want to learn, I want to hear different things, you know, that kind of thing. What was your?
Yeah, and then so like for example, my parents super pro-Israel, like
okay.
so conservative in every way, except that they're scared that, Supreme Court, I guess, could overturn gay marriage for no reason. My best friend in high school, Alex, also gay, and, he's aligned with me on every political belief. But how, and I know you said you were liberal, I guess, but you also have all these conservative values.
Right.
How can we, as I guess, young, activists, continue to maybe get them to hop ship with us? That makes sense?
Okay, hop ship from what?
Still defend, gay marriage and stuff like that, but if 99% of your beliefs are conservative,
Yeah.
why should you, vote Republican every day?
Right, so that's a good question, and so I think that I think my book, and George, correct me if I'm wrong, you would be like, actually, I didn't get that at all. But it's a very much a critique of identity politics. And that used to be like a bad word to say. Like if you said like identity politics, you'd be like, you're a racist. Like you can't critique identity politics. But identity politics is poison. If we are dividing ourselves in not like amongst what we think are conservative ideals or beliefs or liberal or whatever our economic ideas, and we're dividing ourselves by these superficial categories, which are a lot of them very socially constructed in terms of how we formulate, who's white and who's white non-Hispanic and who's Hispanic. Really, if we're dividing everyone amongst all these things and not about what we, suddenly it's like, oh, it's now you're not gay, you're LGBTQIA+. And so what does that mean? Well, first of all, that's the part of the two things. That's ridiculous because every lesbian isn't trans and every trans person isn't whatever and every da-da-da-da, that's stupid. But what it does is it kind of gives this idea of like a voting block of no, we're all these things, we are queer. We are all in agreement on all, we're not in agreement. There are 10 gay people that I know that I can't stand. That I hate, right? Whoever, that think totally different from you. We have all these, we're all individuals. So what are our ideas? What do we think about? So if you want to fight back against and kind of pull people into your movement or like whatever it is you're going for, then run as far as you can with that perspective, that approach of like, I do not give a flying F about your identity. What do you think? Because you know what does not care about our identities? Reality. The truth. It does not give, disease, none of it matters. It completely doesn't discriminate. We're all just trying to survive and make it to a long life, to succeed, to do well, our families to do well, to be kept safe, just to be happy, right? That's what I would say. I would say like run that, if you can kind of bring that approach to it and, like kindness, right? I mean, in terms of not like the whole like, oh, but I being a hairstylist for 13, 15 years, I developed personal relationships with people from all walks of life. I mean, there were folks that were very that did not like gays or did not like agree with me on anything, but they liked me, and not just because I did a good job with the hair, but like we vibed, I cared about them, about their families. For years, I was seeing them every 4 weeks. A woman who, whatever, and it wasn't like they suddenly were like, oh yes, on fire, whatever. But they changed, like not everything, their beliefs, but they were like, oh, he's just a human being, and he has all these, and I care about this guy. Like I love this guy, he loves me. We have these things, and our identities do not matter. What we have in common is like he cares about me, and he cares about like how are you doing? What's going on? I care about him. I'm happy for him, etc. Yeah. You gotta go.
No, I was gonna say, first of all, you were right about that one thing. Like I saw Steve today, he's like, let me talk about the economy. Next week he's like, let me break down Ukraine. And I'm like, wait a second.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Stephen A. Smith, he's like a sports commentator.
Okay.
He's like, let me break down Ukraine. And I'm like, hold on, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'm gonna run for president, and I'm like, dude, like what's he doing? But I know you mentioned the drug use, and that's like such a really sad thing that's happening in American society today. And really everyone's susceptible to it to some extent, right? We all have vices in our lives, but like how do you feel? I know the liberal mentality is like, they're giving out needles in San Francisco, like, anybody, we'll make it safe and easy for you, and it sort of gets the problem. But how do we solve the drug problem in America? Because it's ruining a lot of people's lives. A lot of people really die.
I have all the answers. I know, I'm just kidding. No, I don't. I know that what I said before, I was like, I didn't want to live my life as a victim, and I actually was like, I wanted to get better, and I did get better because, I mean, what else was there? Like, I was in psych wards, I was suicidal, I was getting arrested, like, oh, I was gonna die. So what else? That wasn't fun, right? And so when I had this chance to get a little bit better and to make life better for myself, I took it and I did it. It was awful and hard and ridiculous. And I know I'm a kind of maybe accepts the rule. Like, it doesn't have, everybody that tries doesn't get better, right? But what we want to do is encourage people to get better. We want to be like, yeah, victimhood, being a victim for the rest of your life, living that queer life, that's not actually, that doesn't lead to have, that's not cool. And it's not because the world's against you, and anybody that is in your color or creed or your sexual orientation or your gender or whatever, you can't survive in this cis heteropatriarchal capitalist world. Leave it to them. You're doing just fine. It's not you, it's everyone else. And nothing about you to say, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim. That is that. That approach, supplying needles,
Right.
and then taking money away from rehabilitation programs or whatever it is that needs to be done. But again, like the approaching things in a specific way, and I guess I wanted just to talk about that whole history of like where I was coming from, because at the basis of underneath like this thing, those ideologies, those dogmas like are very, very pervasive. So I love that you're talking about like what policy, like what can we do here? Like, you know that doesn't really sound right. You need to be able to say like why, right? And like you need to be able to be like, actually that's bad, and not to be like, oh, you just want to be a victim and you want to just be able to shoot up and you want da, or like, oh, you're just and here I want to be abundantly clear. When I say that what these kind of projects have in common is this kind of like anti-capitalist, like burn it all down, rebuild a socialist utopia, I would say 89.7% of the people that are, just going along with whatever that are called themselves over that have no idea that that's the project or that that's what they're doing. None. They did not all agree, oh, yes, like if they, no. It's not, it's just, you just go along, you're busy, you want to get laid, you want to get whatever, you're just going along, oh, you tell me this is great, you tell me this is good, and this is cool, and yeah, I hate that guy, so I'm going to vote for this person, whatever. So many people do not know that that is what they're feeding into. So they don't realize that they're kind of building this world where it's like, it's epitomizing victimhood as like the ultimate. Because, as victims, then you're kind of, this kind of inverted hierarchy of like, this victim hierarchy, intersectionality, where it's like the worse off and the more struggling you are, if you're like, the more debilitated, the more just, whatever, you are completely immune to criticism. Your ideas, whatever you have to say is right, because of this kind of holy shroud around this intersectional halo that surrounds you. I'm not going to disagree with your thoughts and what you have to say, and I'm going to just make this space for you, and I'm going to carve this out. That's crazy, and that's dehumanizing, ultimately. And nobody wins that way. And for a lot of people that are kind of building along those lines of like, yeah, so needles and this and that, it all ends in pretty hurts, right? Victim, really, it's either, it just leads nowhere. So I think, hopefully that in a roundabout way answered the question. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
This is more back to the gay lesbian concept.
Sure.
I know you made it clear that your gay lesbian category is totally different from the queer category. Is what you stand for under the rainbow pride flag, is that specifically where you fall under, or do you think that is leaning more towards the cult, like, queer identity you mentioned before?
Okay, yeah, I am allergic to that shit. To me personally, like, I can't even, I hate it, right? But to me, it's just because it just screams an ideology. It's just like a religious flag. It's just like it's saying to me that if you walk this way and you abide, if you salute this flag, you have to agree with all of these different things. And if you dissent, then you're evil and you're horrible and you're bad. You know, the old rainbow flag doesn't really doesn't bother to trigger the flag over. It'll get really triggered by the old rainbow flag. But you know, I was just coming from a place, like coming out of the 80s, 90s, like coming from this place where it preceded, you know, shows all of this stuff. You know, when I say like this identity politics approach to everything, kind of like funneling us all into these different categories, is just so toxic and such a cancer. Fundamentally, the identity politics, there was a way that they worked in the past, like the civil rights movement, right? Well, the civil rights movement was kind of a fundamentally conservative project because it's working within the system to reform it and to make it so that we're all kind of, you know, having these equal opportunities, right? We're not, now, when we get into like affirmative action and we get into all these different things, there's different things that we can talk about where it's like, that's not necessarily like, you know, there's very different approaches to that, and that's not necessarily about equality, it's more about equity and so on and different things. But there's a value to having people, you know, work together that perhaps like based on the same thing, women's suffrage, like getting the right to vote. You know, there's different things where identity can kind of like be, and for me, you know, coming up in a place where I did grow up in is whatever you think about gay marriage or same-sex marriage or whatever, and you know what, maybe you don't even think this, maybe you think that you know, sissy boys should all like, you know, be able to just masculine and be fine or whatever you think, but it wasn't fun, right? It wasn't fun to grow up in a world where it was like AIDS and death. You know, like that was pretty much what the possibilities were. So for me, organizing along with like the rainbow folks, I was like, yeah, I want them to be able to serve in the military proudly. Yeah, I want to be able to do this. And then we kind of made it. We did it. I don't like rainbow flags. I think they're ugly. Like, I actually think they're silly and kind of ugly. But like, you know, I appreciated them in the past because yeah, like nostalgia and like whatever sometimes. Like, sure, I'll hold a little rainbow flag. I mean, whatever, but I'm just not super into it. So that's how I feel about that. But with the progress flag and all this stuff, all it does is just scream with belief in the faith system. Go ahead, get a follow-up.
Yeah, continuing identity from someone who grew up in ostracized from their background. I could say I had a similar background. I was bullied in high school, but I wasn't, not for being zesty, I wasn't zesty, but I was bullied for my appearance and also because I, for one, am not afraid to say I also struggled with mental health, but I was very open about it to people. And the other thing too is I was openly conservative, but the other issue is I noticed nobody was willing to sit down with me and say why they disagreed with me, and all these people just resented me, and I had no friends in high school. And then I tried to keep it to myself in college, but finding college Republicans, I'm not even a registered Republican, but I wanted to find a community where I could sit down with people who are willing to speak to me about these issues. But do you think it's worth, for someone who grew up differently, do you think it's worth putting it out there that you are different? All these people are willing to resent you from something that you know you have no control over, you know they're not going to want to speak to you? Or do you think I should stay silent? Like,
No, never, ever, ever. Because for me, in my opinion, the greatest freedom, the greatest liberty is the liberty and the freedom to think for yourself and speak for yourself. Like, if they bring guillotines back, like, I'm going to be talking and saying what I think until it falls on my freaking neck, okay? About my opinion about his pants and that outfit and that senator and that policy, like whatever. So you talk and you say what you freaking think, and you're going to attract people, and you're going to give people courage to say what they actually think. It's the greatest freedom. Do not take it for granted and don't blow it. But the stakes can be super, super high. So there can be so much incentive not to say anything in different situations. Believe me, I know.
That's contributing, like with the mental part, it's been killing me and it's really been effective, which I know you mentioned.
100,000,000%. And I was so depressed. I mean, I was more depressed because swallowing all that stuff and sitting there, I realized over time that, because I was like, I'm just gonna stay safe, I'm just gonna da-da-da-da. It made me so sick, right? So I was like, I have to. Now, did I deal with consequences? Yeah, I did. I mean, again, I mentioned something about a DEI investigation. I had mentioned something about da-da-da-da-da. I had to leave. But, you know, and I chose to leave this like crazy ass MFA program, which was so glad that I did because, you know, I ended up having getting a great career soon after I left. There's consequences, but you don't die. You deal with it. I mean, it was awful. Like, I mean, the first time that I was like called out, I mean, I just got a message today from somebody, a random stranger, because I published something in the post yesterday, and they were like, I'm not gonna repeat what they said, but I mean, it's just, you know, and you're like, oh, okay, well, there you go, you know. But then I also get a message from a complete stranger that was like, I just read your book. It was like therapy. It brought me to tears. I can't even tell you I read it all in one night. I felt so alone because I haven't been able to say it. You know what I mean? So, but you don't, the sky doesn't fall, and it is really crippling and really, really scary. And it can be. But after that anxiety, it kind of recedes. Just like water. It just kind of slowly, just sitting through it, not like reaching for like, you know, drugs or like alcohol, but just sitting with the anxiety and sitting through that, you know, and talking about it, whether it's a friend, somebody you trust, whether it's seeing a counselor on campus or whatever you need to do, talking to your parent, talking to someone you love who knows you, who you're like, this is what I think, and I just feel horrible because I've been totally dragged. And they're like, I love you, and it doesn't matter. Like, I know who you are, I've known you, it's all good. And then just like slowly, it does recede and it does get better. And so the next time, it's still terrifying. I was scared coming here tonight. I was scared coming here, not because of like all of you or anything, but I was just like, you know, I saw the flyer that they were putting up on campus, and I was like, holy shit. Like, you know, like I was just imagining all the folks walking by on campus, like, the queer call. And I was like, oh my God. You know, and so I was like, okay, well, hopefully there's not people with pitchforks waiting outside the door. I hope not, you know. But yeah, so it does. It can be intimidating, but like we had a good night tonight, right? Like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna be like, oh, that was awesome. Like, these guys were awesome. I got to talk to them. It was fun. Hopefully they got something out of it. Maybe a couple about my book, or maybe not. I don't know, but maybe that really helped. Anyway, so, you know, hey, but it was good and it helped me. Like, I learned in this setting, and that's great, you know. So just keep talking. Do not ever shut up.
Thank you.
All right. Yes. Oh.
So I have one last very important question.
Yeah.
So, at the beginning when we were talking, you said that you used to watch soap operas with your sisters.
Yeah.
So, my mom loves soap operas.
Okay.
She just was watching old stuff with me. Actually, the other day she just showed me, she found online 1985 to 1989, The Face of Our Lives.
Wow.
She has it in a file.
Wow.
And when I'm home, we're gonna watch it. I've seen it a little bit, but we've gone through Dallas and Dynasty, and now I'm starting to watch Days and also Teen GH. So I just wanted to, long story short, say, you know, ask what would be your favorite, if you remember.
That's so great. Well, you're in for a world of fun with that. And it's so cool to watch those things because it's such a cultural, you learn so much from past cultural, I mean, the way people talk about different things, the way men and women talk to each other, and the sexes relate, how people are approaching. it's just all of these things. It's like this eye, it's this lens into where you're, it's awesome. So that's like so great about it too, and then drama and all that stuff, the fashion, whatever it is. Bold and Beautiful and Young and Restless. So I was actually different. So those weren't the ones that I watched totally. It was Bold and Beautiful and Young and Restless. They came on like one after the other. Bold and Beautiful was like half hour, Young and Restless was a little longer. It would be like Price is Right, Bold and Beautiful, you know what I mean, or whatever. So that's great. Yeah.
I'd say my favorite of nighttime is probably Dynasty, and then like the daytime is, because that's one.
Got it. Okay, you know what? I need to actually watch Dynasty, so if you get in touch with me and you tell me anything about it, and then I'll email you once I've started watching, I'll let you know what I think.
Just first off, I disagree with a lot of the things I saw in your book, and that's okay. And I disagree with a lot of things in this room, but interestingly, I was also afraid to come here because I was like, what kind of crazy people are going to be here? And I'm returned when it's okay, you know? I'm because of fortunate. I have that same perspective of, like, I want to say I think people certain conservative ideology should experience other problematic things, and I'm just practicing what I preach, so. But, I guess I just wanted to clarify, then what is your, I guess, opinion or understanding of, I know we got like more gender here, but, you know, people who go, so like in your book, you refer to the concept of non-binary as a force. You a couple times dead names and misgender Jack Hamilton, so I was just.
Well, Jack actually good place to do Jack.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The force thing surprised me, I was just wanting to clarify.
So yeah, that's great. And so to me, when I started learning about non-binary, I was like, we're all non-binary. So this is my criticism, and I write this in my book, and I hope that it was clear, and maybe you haven't gotten to it, or maybe it wasn't clear. Well, and if it wasn't, but see, and I'm glad, thank you for asking that, and thank you for coming tonight and everything. And I appreciate you saying that, all of the above. What my issue was with non-binary was I was like, if you're a male and you say, I'm non-binary, and you're saying, and this makes me non-binary, so I'm not typical male in a masculine way, I don't like these things, then suddenly what you're doing is you're saying those things define male. Those things define female. It makes the categories of female and male smaller. To me, that I have a different approach. Male and female are real. Sex is real. Labels are one thing. If somebody wants to call themselves non-binary, that's fine. But to me, it's a selfish political project. It's selfish. It's a self-centered, selfish political project, in my opinion. Because if someone's like, oh, I'm non-binary because I'm not like that, well, then what you're saying is you're putting it out there that everybody that is like that is the wrong kind of man or the wrong kind of woman or whatever. And you're making the categories of man and woman smaller. And I think what we should be doing is expanding them and making them greater. So women can do and be and feel however they want to. And men can do and be and feel however they want to. But it doesn't take away from the material reality of their bodily sex.
So usually gender sex are synonymous,
I'm so tired of the word gender because it's just done so much confuse. It's a valuable concept and it's a valuable word. And I still use it, like I said, gender nonconforming. I'll say gender nonconforming. But the reality is that in the States, especially in the West, this didn't happen so much in like, you know, with the Brits or anything like that. It became a very sex to Americans and kind of our kind of attitude towards like the word sex is just like we think of it as like fornication, we think of it as that. So we kind of brought this new word in to be like it's kind of just like a more kind of neutral, just a softer, more palatable word to use when we're talking in like medical literature and so on. So it kind of started back to kind of just soften the idea of male and female. Now, it wasn't like that in every context, but that was kind of like the approach when it came to like medical literature. And did you know that like the FDA, they actually started ruling it, they were like, this is confusing people because their sex is so consequential. If a woman takes this drug as opposed to a man or a male takes this drug as opposed to a female takes this drug, like non-binary, whatever, it doesn't matter. If they take this drug, they're gonna die, and this is gonna help them. If they get this implant for their hip, it actually works in the male body, it actually does not work in the female body. Like that kind of thing, right? So they're like, this is confusing. And this is not good. People need to understand sex differences and where they are because we need people to live long. We've all these innovations that we've made. We need people. So that is where that kind of came from. And then it also came from with like, you know, with kind of this feminist approach to scholarship and research. Gender was very much like, you know, this kind of idea, like anything a man can do, a woman can do, right? That's not true. Just like it's not true that anything a woman can do, a man can do, right? But it was kind of this ideology and this approach to scholarship to be like, to build the future that we want, which is where women have all the opportunity and they're not seen as any different or any less than men. So we'll say they're just as strong, they're just as powerful, they're just as this, they're just as that. They're the same. We're all the same. And so gender tells us that. Gender shows how it's all constructed and how everything that a female is and everything that a male is and all the ways that we're different, that is entirely constructed by the oppressive society that we've all come up in. The only reason why, as a male, I'm this way and this way and this way and this way is because of how this whole system has forced me to be this way. It has nothing to do with sex differences and physical biology. That's a lie. It does. It's very, very consequential. So gender is a valuable tool to be like, yeah, social conditioning is real. Things are socially constructed. But to me, I'm not a blank slatist. I do not believe that we're born blank slates and that we're completely formed by society and by everything that goes on around us. We are biological beings, and we come from. Are you following what I'm saying? Am I making sense? Am I answering your question? Okay, cool. Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like this to continue forever, but we can't.
Okay.
And we've gone very much over time, but thank you. Thank you for coming. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Now, I have an announcement to make, which is on the elections.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if many of you are aware, but I'll be graduating this semester, most likely, and so I will not be the president. And there's also, I think, Max, I'm not sure what he's doing, but we'll be doing e-board elections, and so if you're interested in running for any of the positions, you're welcome to do so. However, there are a few requirements, such as having tabled or gone to a conference, or at least shown up at 3 meetings for some of the more higher positions. So feel free to send me letters of intent. You have my email, srossi1, or send it to the Republican's email. And you're welcome to run for any positions that you like. It's a democracy, and we'll see who wins the end of the day.
And, as for the positions, obviously our president is retiring or graduating, so the presidency will be vacant. You can choose to run for president. The president, you host the meetings, you preside over all the activities in the club. You're also the liaison between the club and local GOP and other clubs and organizations that we have relations with. We're also federated with the Youth Federation, we call Republicans, so you will also be responsible with diplomacy with them, and if we ever go to any conferences again, and you're the face of the club. I'm the current vice president. I will not be graduating. You are free to run against me if you want. Vice president, we have secretary. Secretary maintains a list of all active members and signups. They maintain decorum at meetings. They take notes for the president. They write weekly emails to inform and remind everyone of the news and upcoming events. Treasurer we need a treasurer. Max has been our treasurer. He's done a great job. Huge shout out to him. He's worked his ass off, and George can confirm that firsthand. Now, Max is also president of, is it a hockey club or something?
Sports management.
Sports management, and so he's a very busy guy, and unfortunately, I don't want him to bite off more than he can chew, so presumably it'd be nice if you don't want to be treasurer anymore, of course you can run for any less demanding position, but you will also need a treasurer. And so the treasurer, if you can't figure it out, you manage the money, you have to go to the treasurer meeting, you reimburse all of our speakers for the events, and you reimburse, when someone buys us food like George. That's all. As for these, there are technically other positions you can run for, but these ones I listed are the ones that have to be filled. Okay? The other ones you can run for, if no one runs for them, we could just appoint someone to those positions next semester. If you're interested in a less demanding position, we have the social media manager, which you run all the social media accounts, you're the digital face of the club. Hopefully that'll be interesting. Just don't crash out too hard on Twitter. Thank you very much. We have a speaker coordinator, again, self-explanatory, and we have a membership recruitment director and organizer. You assist the president and the vice president and the secretary with recruitment and promotion.
If you run for like a position, like say George and I both run for VP, he beats me to it.
Yeah.
Is there a fallback position?
Yes, you can run for more than one position. You can run for as many as you want.
Someone in Binghamton, he never showed up to a meeting and he ran for every single position, I think. Needless to say, he didn't win anything, but he ran for everyone.
Sweet.
Yes.
When are the letters of intent?
The day before the election, so it's December.
Yeah, so the election is December 2nd. So as long as you submit a letter of intent before December 2nd, you have like a lot of time to think about this, you will be fine. And like Shane said, you can only vote in the election or even run if you meet the requirements. You have gone to at least 3 meetings, you have tabled with us, or,
We'll send all the information out.
we'll send an email about this later on, but yes, those are the details. So, thank you everyone for showing up.
Hey, but if you live off campus,
I appreciate you guys. You even have
do you mind voting this for?
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Great, thanks. I don't like why.
I want to thank you.
That's all, folks.